Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about comprehensible input. First off, what do language instructors mean by the term comprehensible input? It's the things that we hear and read that we're able to understand. An easy way to think about it is to remember how we progressed through reading literature as kids. We started off with picture books and board books with a few words per page, and it wasn't us who were doing the reading, it was our parents. But eventually we started reading on our own. The books had a lot of pictures and the words were really, really big, and there were only a few of them on every page. But as time went on, the print got smaller and smaller and the pictures got fewer and fewer. So we advanced from things like ABC Mysteries to Ramona Quimby, and eventually we were reading Lord of the Rings. So as part of Stephen Krashen's language acquisition theory, he includes comprehensible input as one of his hypotheses. And his hypothesis for comprehensible input is that maximum language acquisition happens when input, the things that we read and the things that we hear, is mostly comprehensible or understandable with just enough challenge to promote growth. And he calls this the N+1, where the N represents the things that we already know and the +1 represents the little bit that we don't quite know yet. So let's imagine a language acquirer and they've just learned the song Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes. That's all they know. So their N just consists of simple anatomy: head, shoulders, knees, toes, eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. So what would be appropriate for this learner for their +1 to encourage language acquisition? How about the game Simon Says? This builds on what they already know: head, shoulders, knees, toes, eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. And it not only adds a few new words like shoulders, arms, but it's also adding commands. So now we're adding some more grammar into what they're learning. And we're also doing a bunch of visible actions to support the new learning that's going on. So now the learner knows some actions. They can add that to the body of language that they already know, and their N has grown. What could their next +1 be? Well, maybe we could tell a simple story about visiting the doctor's office. The student can draw on their language knowledge, their N, and also their personal experiences, because everybody's gone to the doctor, and they can use those two things to help them follow along with the story. So it's possible with the limited subject of basic anatomy to get a student from novice low comprehension, where they're just looking at short, simple lists, to a novice high comprehension in 1 or 2 hours. That's pretty cool. So after repeating this kind of process many times over a few weeks, a student could be ready to start understanding or comprehending simple stories with even less lead-in and scaffolding. A few weeks or months after that, they could even start reading familiar stories in the new language by themselves. The question a teacher should ask themselves are, how much does the student already understand, and how much help will they need in order to not be frustrated? You see, new acquisition comes from ambiguity. A student needs to have a means to figure out new meaning with some amount of challenge. If it's too easy, the student will stop paying attention. But if it's too hard, they're going to give up. One final aspect of comprehensible input is that it's super important to make the input interesting and enjoyable. If you remember from the video on the amount of time that it takes to become fluent in French, language acquisition is a big time commitment. If a person's trying to acquire a language, if they can't find anything to read or hear that they enjoy in that language, they're not going to stick with it for 650 hours. They're going to stop after 10 or 15. Now, some recommendations. First recommendation, if there's one trick to fast language acquisition, it's stories. Stories are messy, interesting, and they don't focus on narrow vocabulary lists or grammar rules. They give you whole swaths of the language in authentic ways. Second, start reading and listening to stories as soon as possible. We're trying to maximize the amount of language that we're getting in an hour, and that happens a lot easily when you're doing story listening and reading. Third, whenever you level up in your comprehension abilities, find stories that you already know that are on your level to read and listen to first, and then branch out to unfamiliar things on the same level. For example, start reading classic fairy tales and then dive into folk tales that you don't know. Reread Harry Potter in French and then read La Guerre des Clans. Fourth, when you're ready to find unfamiliar things to read, check out what the native speakers are reading at that level. For French, I like to go to Fnac and get whatever they recommend. And finally, embrace ambiguity. If you come across an unfamiliar word, don't stress about it. As long as you have an idea of what's going on in the story, you're good. If the word pops up a lot, go ahead and look it up. But if you can't figure it out from the context, and if it doesn't seem to affect the plot, just move on. So that's all for now. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.